Hi there. I am Jimmy Snow, host of the Sometimes Show. Used to be the host of Dear Mr. Atheist. I guess I still am. That is a segment on the thing.
Bruh.
Hey guys, it's me again, and Squish Gang is present, and today we have a really exciting video. I'm doing an update on Jimmy Snow, my, I guess now, second most popular video that I've made on the channel. That's kind of a reflection on the year past and the growth of my own YouTube channel. Before we get into that, this look will be on TikTok. This is with the Kaleidos Flower Punk. There will be lots of content going out, which I didn't expect. So that's great. I've all of a sudden had large amounts of inspiration, and with a seemingly lighter semester than last time, things should be going a little smoother in that regard. So this one's about to be a doozy, y'all. Like, I have like tea and receipts in the whole nine. So right out the gate, after the initial Jimmy Snow ordeal, a lot of the channels that had gained popularity from it kind of separated into different types of content, right? You have Brina Rice that kind of continued in the atheist ACA / Jimmy Snow-esque content. You have the commentary girlies, such as myself, that kind of continued on into different types of content and different types of people relating to the people that Jimmy interacted with, rather than Jimmy's type of content itself being atheist content. Then you have people like Katie Daisy that went into a more advocate professional route with the videos that they made regarding Jimmy Snow. And when I mean commentary girlies, I mean like myself, Little Sugar Words, Fat Saie, etc. So I know I already made a video on the response that Jimmy Snow made to the whole Gabbie Hanna situation. However, I'm kind of thinking, as a former fan, what has gone on since then and what has transpired from this whole thing. Parts of the video, again, this is going to be a doozy. We are going to look at the Non-Sequitur show, Matt Dillahunty, and The Line. These are aspects of Jimmy's career that are really important to highlight. We're going to look at Jimmy Snow's channel and its current decline, because that is what is happening. And just going to look at some like recent videos and Twitter activity, just to see like how he's doing personally besides that. So getting right into the first part, the Non-Sequitur show, Matt Dillahunty, and The Line. So, Non-Sequitur show is a show run currently by Steve McRae and a girl named Victoria, who has a channel called Cheshire Vic herself, and they have the channel in possession right now. This was not always the case. The channel originated with 3 people. There was a few. There was a lot of different shows, and it had it's hard to explain the type of channel it is, because it's hard for like the type of content that I make to relate it to anything. But it was essentially like a show with channel with different hosts, different types of shows, and a lot of kind of like talking to other people, interview style shows about religion and society and different issues, like social issues and socioeconomic stuff, thrown in there from time to time. The 3 people that originated were Steve McRae, Jimmy Snow, and Kyle Curtis. I have a timeline drafted of the events of this show. Starting in 2017, the Non-Sequitur show starts. And the Non-Sequitur show had Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis, and Jimmy Snow was there from the beginning. But it was initially those two, Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis, in the partnership. Going to March 2019, which is 2 years later, Jimmy Snow's channel, with his Dear Mr. Atheist segments, gained rapid popularity. And this stems from the Non-Sequitur show. A big part of the Non-Sequitur show is to kind of boost popularity of smaller creators and give light to people in the, not necessarily the term atheist, but non-theist community, because it's different to be against something. Or, people that are kind of skeptics, I guess would be a better use of the term. Because this is what I've learned in researching the show and talking to people a little bit more, is I've actually talked to both the hosts as well. and some of the people affiliated with the show now. And atheist is not quite the term, no affiliation with the ACA, stuff like that. But so March 2019, Jimmy Snow's channel blows up as a result to the Non-Sequitur show. I do want to say some people have claimed things like he bought subscribers or he bought views. I actually don't believe that at all. Looking at, I'll put a picture up of the interaction proportions, and they're very reasonable. Like, they make a lot of sense based on the amount of views, the amount of likes, and the amount of comments. That's pretty standard engagement. Usually, obviously, when somebody buys views, they'll have no comments or they'll have no likes. You know, you can see these different proportions coming in hand when you are having issues with people lying about views and stuff by buying them. So June 11th, 2019, this 3 months after Jimmy's channel starts to blow up, Steve McRae is pushed out of the channel. And the channel becomes primarily run by Jimmy Snow and Kyle Curtis. In October 3rd, Jimmy actually does make a statement about the Non-Sequitur show and the state of the channel with Kyle Curtis. Now, Kyle Curtis is problematic, to say the least. He's been arrested a couple of times. He has recently gone to court for the rights of the Non-Sequitur show and lost the case and no longer has ownership of the channel. I have the statement. I have high school teacher torn it up. We will get to that once I finish the timeline. And we'll see kind of that these patterns of behavior Jimmy's had for a really long time before any of the Gabbie Hanna stuff happened. And I want to do this not to bury the hatchet further, but to kind of, because I know I found myself feeling bad because things like the Sometimes show didn't work out. On a humanistic level, it was kind of sitting funny with me. But you got to kind of remind yourself that if someone can dig their own grave, you know? And it's really hard for me because I never want to be in that position, neither does anybody, right? And usually, like, it's one thing when you can tell there's no passion for it anymore, but when it's like the passion project that doesn't work, it's quite hard to sit with. February 2nd, 2020, the first episode of the line, at least the first episode that is available on YouTube right now. Now I'm gonna overlay Kyle Curtis and Jimmy Snow's show on Non-Sequitur with the line. And I just want you to see how similar it is. I'm not alleging that he copied it.
Going to be taking your voicemails. Good to see everybody. Big long weekend I had here. That's why we didn't have a Friday live show. Lots of really interesting stuff coming up in this week's episodes of Dear Mr. Atheist, including some video I took confronting a street preacher that was standing outside of an anime convention and calling out all of the people in costumes for their being just lots of things.
Some of the higher vets unless it's to work with machines like inanimate objects.
As with all things, we have to be careful of just assuming stereotypes, because that is, I mean, I have people who I'm very close with. I have members of my family, all who were in the military, who I wouldn't be like, oh, and that means they're bad for this reason, or there's this negative. I think the thing that we're trying to identify is in the same way that we talk about, let's just say we take Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Scientology. If we give, using Owen's model, a Fibonacci score to each one, they have a different score. So in that situation,
you can decide if I'm alleging that he copied it. I'm just saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm just saying somebody might have had some inspiration, you know? There might have been some toying, especially when you had access to the show, seen the editing, seen the process, and designed some things. That is all. Any hoozles. So first, the line episode called It Is Time to Let Go of God, which had Matt Dillahunty in it. This did not have Kyle Curtis. The line channel was Matt Dillahunty and Jimmy Snow. As you can see, as you will see by the statement, this is because that infamous October 3rd, 2019 Non-Sequitur show statement is Jimmy admitting that Kyle Curtis might have not been the guy, right? June/July, because it bled into both of those months of 2021, the Rachel Oates situation occurred.
Hey everyone, so here it is, the video where I'm going to respond to a lot of the things being said about me right now. Let me preface this by saying
I think I messed up a lot by doing everything improvised last time. So
Now, this snake-ass man deleted all of the videos. I don't know if I find them. If I find them, I've edited them in, and that's really good for me. If not, watch my other videos because they have the clips in them. Because I changed over my solid state drive in my computer since then, so that's why that'll be the only reason I don't have them. So in August/September of 2021, Jimmy kind of disappeared from the line as far as being on the shows for the most part, because he was the scandal of the year. He was that girl. So given that he got himself in some hot water and tried to tangle with the wrong ladies, that he then imposed misogyny upon, there is a result of he's kind of just been on the background, but then he replaced him with, well, now it's the face of the channel's Matt Dillahunty, an old guy who looks like this, who reminds me of this, and marries younger women, which, knowing from my channel, we love that. We love that when that happens. It's a yikes. Anyways. And then in December of 2021, the Non-Sequitur show is turned back to Steve McRae. And once getting turned back to Steve McRae, he kind of joined with Victoria, who is Cheshire Vic, like I mentioned before, and then she's on the channel as well. And then they're following that kind of, they're trying to reinvigorate the formula as it stands right now. So now we're looking at Jimmy Snow's statement, and we're going to read that. And this is regarding Kyle Curtis, Steve McRae, and the Non-Sequitur show. I'm going to put right here, Mr. Scooch, I'm going to put right here the statement, but I'm going to put in the version that I wrote all over so you can follow along if you want to. So, regarding Kyle Curtis, Steve McRae, and NSS Non-Sequitur show. I was wrong. I was lied to. So immediately hedges. Responsibility. Immediately. Literally. 3 words in. My trust was taken advantage of, and one of my best friends made me look like an asshole. I was wrong is taking responsibility. But then immediately hedges with, but it's because I was manipulated. I did not do anything wrong on my own merit. I did not do anything wrong because I wanted to be responsible, or I wanted the fame, money, acclimates, etc. from that channel. I believed my friend when he told me he had a lawyer. He had the money, that he would pay Steve what he was owed, and that he had everything he needed to prove that the channel was his, and that he had the authority to remove Steve from the channel. Also, I wanted to say that there's a Non-Sequitur live stream where Vic and Steve go through the whole statement with a lot more like context to the situation. I'm here to do context on Jimmy more than anything else. So if you want like a huge breakdown, it's about, I think they start about an hour in to the live stream, and then there's like 2 hours at the end that don't relate to it, if I recall. Because I had trust in my friend, as did many others, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. A fact that even Steve expressed understanding, and that for a time did not act contemptuously towards me for that position. To bring forward the fact that Steve McRae did not immediately act contemptuously is interesting, because that's imposing the idea that most people's immediate reaction is anger. Perhaps there was an idea that Steve maybe wanted to search for a bettering of the situation. Maybe. I'm just speculating. I'm just saying whether Steve's responses are neither here nor there in this regard. What I'm trying to say is essentially that the idea that contemptuous reaction would be immediate, and supposing that shouldn't change given that being contemptuous wasn't the first response, also doesn't take into account the fact that people's emotions can change. Especially if you keep repeating these actions over and over and over again, people can get quite tired of you and for lack of a better term, your bullshit, right? I also decided to stay out of it publicly. The only times I recall engaging publicly about it was my conversation with Steve, which ended amicably, and asking a lawyer friend in his live stream whether or not Steve sharing Kyle's unredacted address was equivalent to doxing. However, I never publicly stated that it was, though I will admit now my belief that it is. Lots of things are public record. Heck, I'm in the phone book that doesn't make it okay to share. Also, it's correct that Kyle didn't have residence there at the time, but I do think Steve knew that he wasn't lying when he made that defense. That wasn't a sentence. Like, that was all one sentence, right? The lawyer friend was Nate the lawyer, who allegedly, perhaps, maybe, and it might be on Twitter, and I might have linked it, maybe not, we'll see. I don't want to get sued, don't sue me, allegedly. Maybe not true, maybe true. Please don't sue me. Had admitted to like fiddling with some legal stuff in his own career, so Nate might not be the most trustworthy person ever. So I said you cannot take ownership and publicly benefit from something just to completely separate from the second that there is any sort of conflict. That would be like if, like say I did the streams, like I did the stream with actually Cheshire, which is called Time of the Month. And if the second that Time of the Month, someone said, I don't want to do it anymore, and then they started beginning to slander Victoria, the owner of the channel, if I just began to immediately agree with them on terms that were unrelated or just pretended that nothing ever happened. Jimmy mentions his involvement with the channel at positive times that it could benefit him and essentially retracts any responsibility at any time that there's conflict. So my public positions, those that would have affected Steve, were these. I expect Kyle to pay Steve. I believe Kyle has a lawyer. I am not going to publicly engage, despite this is public engagement, but anyways, I expect this to be resolved by the courts. I am not going to allow my live streams and comments to be hijacked with the issue. People who try to force it will be blocked. Asking questions, contemptuous or not, is not hijacking a live stream. You are somebody who blatantly attacks other creators and demands that they respond. And when you're like a lot of even atheist commentators will do Caitlyn Bennett videos and then talk about how she doesn't respond to certain comments and kind of just deflects to them. That's exactly what you're doing on something that you were directly involved in. So regarding these positions, I will admit I was wrong, or at least that seemed to be the case now. So I just said, how were you wrong now but not before, but you're talking about the same instance? There's a difference between being misinformed, but just because you were misinformed does not mean you were right initially. That is something that people don't realize, is if it's consistently wrong, whether your knowledge at the time or not, you are still wrong. A lot of people on the internet have that problem and they won't admit to these things. Because if they were misled at one point, they think that there's no responsibility there, which is, again, incorrect as a presumption to make. I was correct that it would be resolved by the courts. In this case, Steve won the case by default judgment, and I suspect had Kyle actually fought the case, he would have lost that too. Though ironically, he fought it, I doubt he would have been on the line for much. So I just said, how could Kyle have been less wrong, whether he caved or not? But also I had what with 2 question marks because that was so poorly written that I wanted to scream. I do not regret refusing to let people hijack social media outlets. So I love inflammatory speech, right? I love hyperbole online. It just greases my gears, or, gets the cogs going in my head, because I'm like, as soon as I see hyperbole like that, what's your intention for the hyperbole? It's the first thing I'll think of. What emphasis are you applying with that hyperbole? In the case of this, he is saying that attention to the situation is something that he does not like, and the attention to the situation is something that he believes he has no responsibility for. Despite the fact that, like I said, his platform was built from this channel. He essentially should be, like, he came from this. So the hyperbole of hijacking as a term, because a couple questions in your comment section is not hijacking. Hijacking would be if you got a bunch of spam calls or callers during your show, or if, I don't even know how you would hijack a live stream, to be honest. That is not something I was wrong for doing. At the end of the day, I trusted my friend, and that friend screwed me with my own trust. Jimmy decided that he set what it means to lead secular content, yet caved when, not caved yet, he pushes back when having to be forced away from a successful source of audience of that secular content. He thinks, like, the guy that he wanted the most trust in, the guy that he wanted to succeed the most, that's made the content most similar to his, being a bad person means he must negate all responsibility from the issues with the channel. I'm bringing this up because this really feels like the initial Gabbie Hanna statement, this very, again, heavy in hyperbole, heavy in emotion. And I'm not somebody who believes rhetoric should be without emotion. I think that's a weird, often misogynist driven idea that stems from like virtue ethics and Aristotle from like thousands of years or what, hundreds of years ago or whatever, which makes no sense. And I think my favorite thing is that when people say they don't have emotional rhetoric and then they're angry all the time and they don't realize that anger is an emotion. You get that little board with the faces on them that when you're a kid and you point at one of them's got an angry face. It's almost like being angry is an emotion. So, as far as ethics go, I never promised anything. So I put in quotations, I never said I'm not an asshole. That would be if, like, making this content and telling you things I've learned at school, I dial back and go, I never promised that it was 100% correct to my understanding. Because I know in my last video I made a formal logic error with not putting if. I said if P then Q, but I didn't do if P, if and only if. Like, I didn't make like a solid lines because I was trying to simplify it, and in simplifying, oversimplified it and led too much open. That was like an honest mistake. Like I said, I'm just trying to apply what I was thinking into a way that was easier to see. But again, I didn't add the conditioner clause that makes that work. It was just weird because I guess I did it a little bit too off the cuff, maybe, because I know formal logic and I've done really well in it in the past. So back to the statement. And in fact, I only expressed my expectations. This is my first definitive public statement, and you can read it as this. Which I feel like if you're making a formal public statement, why are you swearing? And that's from me. That's from me. For people who know me in my personal life, I cuss a lot, and that is because the French people in Quebec love swearing. So Kyle fucked a lot of people who cared about him, and frankly, he fucked over Steve. Now, regarding the attacks towards me from Steve McRae and crew, I am not apologizing to Steve for my being incorrect to trust Kyle. I took no public actions and made no public statements, despite the fact that he admitted talking about it with Nate the Lawyer on live stream just like 3 paragraphs ago.
There are so many unexplainable things, but the thing is if the question is flawed by itself. You just said if there's no God, why are there unexplainable things? The question implies that unexplainable things have then been explained by God. Is it unexplainable, or are you saying that it's God there? And then do we have a good reason to believe that God is the explanation?
And, I think that question is the perfect example of appealing to a bigger mystery, right? How can you explain unexplainable thing? And that person's explaining it with an unexplainable thing, right? Here's another unexplainable thing to explain the unexplainable things.
So I took no public actions and made no public statements about him regarding this case, and so his demand for an apology is strange in the first place. So I said just taking advantage of a channel strip from somebody else that you've admitted rightfully had ownership over it due to the results of the courts is something that I believe warrants an apology. People who think other people are stupid write in a certain way. I've noticed in my time here. And Jimmy Snow is one of them. Huge people who does that. Where he'll make a claim, a conditionary claim, and then later down the line, negate that own condition-based claim in the sense that he doesn't think the audience would grasp that. Because so he admits higher up that he makes no public statements because it's not under his terms, and he hedged before, saying that he mentioned it with Nate the Lawyer publicly before. So, but the thing is that like Jimmy's audience aren't kids, and they're not like people who aren't intelligent to the most extent. Like it's not like James Charles putting out a statement, right? Where it's gonna be like 14-year-olds or people like, young kids or people who don't really understand this type of stuff yet. This is a very complex legal legal issue that had a lot of nuance, and this is what he came with. He really came in with this and said, yeah, I ate. I really posted up on that one. I popped off. The only thing that popped off, the only thing that's popping off are my brain cells, and by that they're exploding. Because I'm God. I always do this statement reading because like it's like what I do for school, but at the same time it makes me just like God. Anyways, also right now if things had gone differently, I would have the greatest sympathies for Steve, but the horrific way he has spearheaded a campaign of harassment and cyberbullying of myself, about which I don't actually care much. I did not regret refusing to let people hijack my social media. I trusted my friend, and that friend screwed me with my own trust. I don't think you'd phrase it like that if you didn't care. But anyways, but more importantly, anyone who didn't kiss his ring and publicly attack and disparage Kyle is disgusting and extremely unethical. And I said, again, putting blame on poor response on your own behalf is your own undoing. So then I continued and I said, Steve was fucked over, that I will admit. It's just weird because it's very inconsistent. It's like, Steve was fucked over, but I hate his ass. And like, I wasn't wrong. But I was wrong because I trusted Kyle. And I liked Kyle. But Kyle fucked over Steve. But like, no. It just feels like one of those like, those memes of like the iMessage paragraphs that are like super, super long. And it's like somebody like just like going off on somebody else. And it's really all over the place. It's super confusing. Well, I mean, this isn't the notes apps, I suppose. Steve was fucked over, that I will admit. I also think Steve is a toxic narcissist who now commands an army of trolls who will undoubtedly take up the mantle on this statement and will continue to invade my and other social media accounts because my admission of being wrong but not wrongdoing and certainly not an apology towards him will not suffice, and they will do the only thing they know how to: harass. Okay, 3 things. 1, what happened to not caring? 2, toxic narcissist is a god term on social media, one that I think he might have picked up from Gabbie Hanna, to be honest, which then comes into term of this repeated behavior that I keep trying to mention. And the non-sequitur stuff is really unearthed. Like, people might want to say, you know, you've worked with Steve and you've worked with Vic, right? And you have a bias against him in this case. Maybe. However, at the same time, I made those Jimmy videos before talking to them. And I also made my own opinions on Jimmy before talking to them. And reflecting on this, I'm seeing the things I mentioned in the first video without talking to them at all. So I don't think this is I think this is, at least this statement as it functions, I am staying internally to this statement. And as how this statement functions, this is a mess. So I also said a comment about the trolling. It's interesting that you're mentioning that he's commanding an army of trolls, which Steve might be able to argue that he was doing it if he agrees that he did this for a rightful cause. In that case, Jimmy's pumpkin lore, like all that pumpkin stuff, was to troll a pastor that promoted horrible things. I love a little light trolling, okay? Not like mean trolling. I'm talking like Zachary Michael making Amberlynn's food trolling. Like, we're not talking about like anything serious. But Jimmy Snow has like the pumpkin website related to that pastor. That's trolling. Your biggest lore, even the tweet that this statement was in, Jimmy Snow had the pumpkin with his name. That's trolling. So I thought it was like weirdly hypocritical. But anywho, people are allowed to be hypocritical. People are allowed to change their mind. But I feel like a statement is not somewhere to do that. Like a statement against like a public record thing is not a good place to do that, personally. To my audience / followers and subscribers, I'm certain most of you are aware of how much I cared about Kyle, and you must know how betrayed and heartbroken I am right now. I said that's a plea to emotion fallacy, right? Like, that's just so blatant. Guys, feel bad for me. Please. I loved Kyle. And while you're feeling bad for me, can you call Steve a dum-dum? And can you please make sure that no one ever asks me about it in my comment section? Please? But don't troll. Because I don't troll. I'm too good for trolling. Except that pastor. And except Caitlyn Bennett. And except Paul Morgan. And except the people that made the videos about me with Gabbie Hanna. And except the people that tweet me. Godless. Okay, anyways. So the request I have for you is this. Oh wait, I'm not done yet. Oh my god. Holy Lord. Okay. I actually wrote the comment before was plea to emotion, ironically placed after claiming people do not care about like his feelings and how he doesn't care about it either. So it would not be wrong to say that I loved Kyle, except that I don't think I ever actually knew who Kyle was. At one time, this was to a lesser extent true of Steve too. Steve and Kyle were some of the earliest people to take a chance on me, and that meant the world to me. The loss of both of them as friends has been hard on me. In both cases, the decision to sever the friendship when they passed what I could handle. And I just said it's really interesting that he says that they're the first people to take a chance on him, but give no credit to any of the growth that it gave him, which is really gross. Like I think I literally frequently credit Jimmy Snow's situation to my growth. I have a video, when you go on my channel, like the channel trailer, I'm just doing my makeup, I'm talking about stuff. I talk about like how the Jimmy Snow video was my big hit, that and like my first Creepshow art and now my second Creepshow art video. And I've had a little bit of growth, a feature of other channels, but not so much. And especially at the level like of something like the Non-Sequitur show, I've never experienced, and I will still commend or mention those that gave me traction. So I just hate when people don't, like, how big your ego has to be to do that is interesting. And also the separation of dropping Steve on some sort of moral thing. And it's clear on how much he's hedging and flip-flopping on this whole situation regarding Kyle, that he dropped Kyle to save face. He didn't drop Kyle because Kyle was, because there's mentions of some sort of inner conflict, but if you look at the timelines and stuff as well and how long it took, I don't think he did it I think what happens is he did it to save face and then later reflected on it and has a different feeling now than he did before, which also is fine. I love people changing their minds. So the request I have for you is this. I would like this to be the only statement I make on the matter. Steve won. That's what happened, and I accept that. At this point, even though I strongly disagree with how he has acted, I believe he was legally in the right and was fucked over by Kyle. I will ask you all to allow me to move on, and I suggest that you do too. They were on the channel when there was an alleged cease and desist. You clawed and screamed at the last minute. And when you're like that, it's really hard to ask for grace in return. So then there will be those who try to insist this remain in my purview. Me. But it will be futile attempt, as what I've stated now is entirely how I feel, and that's all I will ever be willing to share. Thanks all. I love most of you. And I have 3 question marks. That doesn't make sense. So I just said nominalization of situations. He is omitting. So nominalization is the omission of complex processes with shorthand explanations of friendships and no development on how Kyle really fucked over Steve besides not paying him, and how any responsibility of him participating with Kyle beyond the point of these legal issues coming in with the channel. Okay. That was a lot. That was heavy. Okay, part 2. My mouth is dry. 1 second. Part 2. Jimmy Snow's channel and its decline. So I actually unsubbed in the summertime after the Gabbie Hanna situation happened because I started to find his content insufferable. If you look at the timelines, if I remember correctly, my video was like a couple weeks in. I think I remember being like, I'm just going to make it because I want to talk about him. Like, I know all the clout has died. Clout didn't die because I got like 20,000 views. But, I was kind of just like 20,000 views, by the way, with like 165 subscribers, I want to say. So I unsubbed because I found the content insufferable, especially after watching the Gabbie Hanna response video, because that one was like the beginner's guide to fallaciousness, in the sense of all these fallacies that he normally used because he was in a more emotional and less edited state, was not able to get rid of them in the way that he normally would, or buff them out with this person bad.
The big thing that I resent here is that so many people have left these comments demanding I answer for it, demanding I apologize,
and have even had comments who have like, Jimmy, you needed to hear Rachel's side of the story and apologize. And you know what? None of those comments have in here. All of these comments attacking me, telling other commenters they should unsubscribe, and just saying hateful things about me. None of the people driving it have once gone, Jimmy, what's your side of the story? I probably would have addressed this sooner if that was the motivation, but it hasn't been. It's all been hateful comments and all just saying, Jimmy, you did this. And I'm saying you did it. And there's going to be no accountability for any of that, by the way. The only people who are actually held accountable in this relationship, I talked about this earlier this week on the Trisha Paytas Ethan Klein thing. The only people who will be held accountable for the misinformation that was spread, or people held accountable for still 2 lies said about them, are the public figures involved. None of the audience who have done bad things here, no people involved in that, will there be any accountability for.
Because usually when you argue with somebody, or you argue, like Jimmy Snow's case with his public interactions on his channel, he's arguing with people that his audience will objectively find as bad. The problem is that he was arguing with a counterpart and someone that had a pretty good reputation and wasn't like making arguments on objective things such as like opinions on human rights, let's say, which are more objective than something like a kind of personal fight between 2 people. After this issue with Gabbie Hanna and all the girlies making the videos, the Sometimes Show backlash also kind of came from those videos. I know I made a comment on it because I found that it was very manipulative, that he would do community tab posts and he would do a bunch of stuff whining about how nobody was watching the content, even though he worked so hard on it. Why would you do that to him? He worked so hard on content that nobody liked. Because I remember he even said, I couldn't find the clip when I was editing, and I'm not about to be bothered to do it now. I'm so sorry, guys. But there was one point where he said, like, if it doesn't break 30K views after the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm shutting it down. And he pushed for months with like 20K, 30K views on it. And he would, like I said in my other video, he'd cherry pick comments that were like, this is good. He even continued the Sometimes Show during the Gabbie Hanna backfire. And he had his friend Dominic sub in for some of the difficult times during the backlash. As of 2 months ago from today, which probably 3 months now, I don't know, something like that, the Sometimes Show seems to have stopped from the original format. And Jimmy Snow actually claims that it was emails. He claims that it was emails of people saying that wasn't the content they came for. Not the comments, not us talking about it in the videos, not Twitter, not his interactions, not his numbers, emails. Shifted essentially to only live streams and Dear Mr. Atheist content. I watched one of the live streams. No, I didn't. I watched like 30 minutes of it on like almost 3 times speed. Or something like that. Like, I could not sit through it. It was so drawn out and weird and awkward and just unpleasant. So I just couldn't do it. So I want to get into the Dear Mr. Atheist content because this is actually the most profitable content that he makes, obviously, because that's what he's pumping out now. And I want to talk about my actual issues with it, which also led to me subbing to the channel originally and have led to me thinking about this to this point. Many atheists on a basic level, okay, hold up. I should preface before I say this. I'm talking about people who don't critically think about atheism to the same extent that they ask that theists think critically about their religion, okay? I'm not saying atheism as a concept. I'm saying these big logic men that do logic arguments and then in reality they're not well thought out. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about atheists as a concept. I'm talking about, because there's like a certain breed of creators that do this, right? Like Matt Dillahunty does this as well. And Kyle Curtis did this as well. So they make arguments based on what's called logical empiricism, which also has been referred to as logical positivism. I'm going to say logical empiricism because, as you just heard, I have trouble saying positivism. And also because I know it as logical empiricism. So I defined on Google. I was going to define it from a book, but turns out he's an anti-vaxxer, so I don't want to do that. But the term still stands the same. So is it defined as the view that scientific knowledge is the only kind of factual knowledge and that all traditional metaphysical doctrines are to be rejected and as meaningless. So this is saying like things that you can see objectively are the only possible evidence of anything. So logical empiricism will obviously it will fall flat for things like what is morality or what is consciousness or what's love. Right? These things that are not super tangible, right? Or the expansion of space, or things like quantum mechanics, where these things that you can see are not as prevalent, right? I don't necessarily mean see like eyeballs, I mean see like measure. I want to preface that as well. So Thomas Kuhn, right, who obviously, like, I always say obviously because I assume people are in the same space as me. That's not a good thing to do. Thomas Kuhn, who wrote I always just called Scientific Revolutions. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions is what it's called. Became a contributor to the shift away from logical empiricism in the mid-20th century because, in simple terms, to simplify logical empiricism down to as much as possible, I just kind of mentioned how it works a little bit, is that it leaves zero room for nuance. You cannot have any topics that have disagreeing factors exist within logical empiricism in a way that's like tangible to explain. So to those that are not well versed in topics, nuance though is not the way to understand things. You don't want to bring in super complex and kind of ways that you can't necessarily fully agree or fully disagree right out the gate when someone's just learning to do something. It's the same way as when you learn a new language, right? Let's say I wanted to learn Spanish. I shouldn't start learning necessarily with immediate colloquial sayings, right? Like, I'm not going to say, let's say I'm teaching somebody English. I'm not going to start with whatever floats your boat. You know, I'm going to teach them how to say their name, how to pronounce their name. I'm going to teach them how to introduce themselves. You don't start with these more complicated and not necessarily two-sided thought processes. So if you take the simplest arguments, logical empiricism seems like the only way to approach things. But I talked about this in my other video, and actually a bunch of atheists in my comments got really mad. I said that there are origins from religion that led to thought processes that Jimmy Snow uses. There are origins from religion that result in many pinnacle parts of modern society, and even things like, I know progymnasmatas have a bit of Christian, like, over time. Progymnasmatas is like a type of education process, has a bit of kind of inspiration from Christianity as it progressed. So like in the progymnasmata that Shakespeare worked through. That's just a bit of like literature knowledge. Like, but the point is, there are complex philosophical natures that come from Christianity. I personally, even as an atheist myself, think that like St. Augustine's writings are some of the best ever. And that I can separate myself from my personal beliefs, which is something that you wouldn't be able to do with logical empiricism because that involves a nuance. And I'd be like, well, St. Augustine is writing on not tangible things. So all of the structure has to be false. I have to reject all of the metaphysical elements of it, even though they're helpful for me later. So that's what they're doing, right? So Caitlin Bennett bad is like what I was trying to get at before, right? So it's like Caitlin Bennett says something stupid about Black Lives Matter, right? But you're not taking into account the indoctrination that she's faced in her personal life, whether from religion or not, even just being in a group with white people. You know, white supremacy and these types of fascism and stuff existed prior to Christianity. Like, that's another thing that there's a lot of just stuff that people give credit and pull and push on different places where it's not necessarily consistent. This video is going to get so many hate comments. Oh my god. Okay, whatever. I'm just being based, I guess. So Jimmy Snow there's nothing interesting actually to report on, which is good. He just kind of tweets about woodworking, which, I mean, pop off, sis. Sure. We love woodworking. I love carpenters. Very fun. I wish I was not afraid of skill saws, but there's a couple little interesting things. I didn't go that far down either because I went off about the Twitter in my other videos. So he retweets Matthew Mercer that says, never underestimate the internet's ability to run wild with falsehoods, cynical misrepresentations, and bad faith takes. Y'all are so weird sometimes. Ha. The unhealthy social media loop has trained all of us to assume the absolute worst of people at all times, and it makes me sad. Don't know who Matthew Mercer is. I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comment section. This is going to be very controversial to say, but I've noticed that most people who comment on cancel culture as this like super disgusting thing, but tend to have pretty bigoted takes themselves. Do I think you need to cancel people on things that aren't necessarily relevant? No. But at the same time, I think people that scream cancel culture are usually the people that have skeletons in the closet. And I think to tweet something like this and to retweet something like this is to say that your perception is of ignoring negative feedback and not wanting to build yourself further. I don't know who Matthew Mercer is. Maybe he's a great guy, but Jimmy Snow retweeting this is saying something to me. That's all I'm going to point out from that. And then Jimmy Snow tweeted, these are both December 9th, actually. So when you're first learning about what constitutes a cult, damn, there are so many cults. When you learn more, oof, I can't believe how many cults I thought there were. I overcorrected. When you learn even more, holy shit, there are so many cults. 3 issues with this. 1, okay, Shane Dawson. In the sense of like how Shane Dawson would throw the words sociopath around all the time. I find that atheists in some of the atheist spaces will throw the word cult around way more often than it needs to. And I'm not necessarily saying religions aren't, like certain religious practices aren't cults. I don't like saying that either because I find that I feel like spirituality is not something that's like consistent all for everybody. And I don't know. I don't want to put it in a box. It's what I'm trying to say. But I'm not commenting on that specifically. I'm talking about they throw around the word cult for a lot of different things. Multi-level marketing companies, Onision's fan base, and religion and different spiritualities, right? So I just don't like, because I find like people in real cults, like the drinking the Kool-Aid type cult, are getting, like it's kind of diluting how hard it was for them. But then again, I know people leaving religion is hard. See, what I'm saying with all of this is huge rant is nuance is required. And you can see by this tweet, this lacks nuance, which again is that kind of logical empiricism approach. So I just said very little on Twitter, appears to want to avoid controversy, much less religious discourse than before. So I did watch some current videos and I said that they felt disingenuous. He's unable to shake himself of the Sometimes Show. And he pretends that the Dear Mr. Atheist is for the audience, but there's a clip, if I find it, because the problem is it was in the video that he deleted, so if I find it, we'll have it. If not, I guess you have to like take my word on it, and you don't have to. If I don't have the receipt and I don't have any proof, you do not take my word for it. But he said, I have to keep the Sometimes Show, because he was talking about how he like couldn't cancel the Sometimes Show, because he was addressing the comments that the girlies had made.
So I have to say that I really love doing the Sometimes Show. I know not all of you are sold on it. Maybe not even most of you are sold on it. But like one of my favorite comments I get on there is that it's from people who say they hated it at first, but now they think it's awesome. The show is growing and I really do like it. But you also deserve the content that you came for. So while we're still going to keep up the Sometimes Show Monday through Thursday, we are right now trying to make sure that you get at least one segment during those Monday through Thursday shows of Dear Mr. Atheist, and then a dedicated of Dear Mr. Atheist on the weekend, at least one, sometimes more, especially when like things aren't going so good and we need to push some traffic to the channel. The next thing I'm going
I know not everyone who made Jimmy Snow content are the girlies. I just like calling them girlies. Okay. But he said like he needs to do it for the money. And then he addresses like slightly later, he touches on it kind of, that he has to go to Dear Mr. Atheist content because he has to like pay his bills or whatever. So he pretends to feel for the audience by addressing that the Sometimes Show wasn't staying because of emails saying they didn't want to. But yet he simultaneously mentioned that it was for money. And what's interesting is I find that his Dear Mr. Atheist content is very T-channel style, which is reporting on something, and then the most toxic ones that people always want to try to come for just antagonize the person they're talking about. But no one would ever call him a trauma channel because he's a man. Because it's not like other communities have drama. The ACA community has so much shit. Oh my god, I haven't even gotten into that. I can make a whole video on that if y'all want, but like Oh my god. Even I talked about like Matt Dillahunty and Kyle Curtis and there's tea. There's tea everywhere. So like Jimmy Snow is essentially an atheist drama channel. But no one's ever gonna say that because he's a dude. And because he uses big words like equivocate or contemptuous, oppose intellectual authority, or terms that are like long sentences and things like that. And I literally said, again, using big words to pick apart simple arguments does not make your argument more complex. Okay? I could say something like, Jimmy Snow imposes his intellectual authority upon those that he has agreed with others in his own field are not worth the oxygen in the same room that he is in. That is the same thing as Jimmy Snow and his peers think people that aren't his friends are stupid. Those are the same point. And those are both not a complicated point. But the other one was long-winded and broken down funny. This is also really common in the science community to do that, to kind of gatekeep who can perceive the message at hand. I try to make my videos as simple as possible. Unfortunately, I do find myself falling into jargon and falling into that kind of long-winded idea from time to time just because I read a lot. And these things are based on what I've read, so I tend to adopt the language kind of in the back of my head, but I try to correct as much as I can. The Sometimes Show also moved into what's called the Sometimes live streams, but it's only been like 3 of them. And if you want an in-depth analysis, Brina Rice has watched them. It's like 6 hours of live stream though. Do with that what you may. I literally said they are braver than I. Shout out girly, because like shit. Oh my god. Or well, they have they pronouns in their bio, but also it might be she they. If not it's they them, I apologize. But at the same time, I just say girly in like a colloquial sense. But Brina icon braver than I am is what I'm trying to say. I watched the most recent live stream a little bit, but I do find that the Sometimes Show format has just kind of dissolved into other content. So now we're getting into the final section. I swear to God, this is so long. Oh God. So I watched the live stream, and these are just the notes. I'm just going to run through the bullet points because there was really nothing going on. So I said the Sometimes Show format with Dom is gone. I haven't found anything recently. Live streams have similar new style formatting to the original Sometimes Show content. However, I said still obvious what content he actually wants to make versus the content that he needs to make money. The last live stream that I found was on Thanksgiving. He did a New Year's one, but it's gone. He still calls opposing people fucking idiots. To be fair, though, he is talking about people who are objectively bad. I just don't like devolving people to that as simply as that, and then assuming that just because I use inflammatory language that I'm correct. Even conservatives have the capacity to change their mind was a quote that he essentially had said, and I'm just like, okay. I just don't like when people make wide claims like that. Personally, though, that's kind of how I like qualifying things a little bit more than that myself. Seems to be doing kind of an Emily Baker-esque live. This one was talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, but with no legal comprehension and kind of working primarily off of hypotheticals and Reddit posts, which I find is not the best approach to something as serious as that. And then I literally just said, got bored, stopped watching. It's just, I did watch, okay, so he put a video out on, I want to say it was January 6th. Yeah, because that was the year after the insurrection, right? Exactly 1 year. So I did watch all of it, and it was the Dear Mr. Atheist format. He didn't have the little box, the white, I think it's a chalkboard or something that he has his little character on. I will give Jimmy that I love his aesthetic. Like, I love the design aesthetic. I think it's really cool from someone who is probably the worst at art. 2 things I'm really bad at and never try to ask me for: dancing and art. So it's Dear Mr. Atheist format. Okay. So he starts by saying that January 6th was caused by religious fundamentalists.
At its core, this was an insurrection, not just of people who love Trump. This is not just an insurrection. This is what we have ignored as far as religious fundamentalism as it intertwines into politics over the last, I guess, inception of the country and the growth of this.
I just said that I feel like this reduces the insurrection as boiling down everything to atheist versus Christian values. Even though a lot of the like what fueled people wanting to affiliate with Trump was actually capitalist desires and capitalism, not because of fundamentalist Christian values. I can almost guarantee that a lot of people on Trump's right hand did not think he was a very religious guy, and that he funneled the Bible stuff just to save face, right? And a lot of people affiliated with Trump put gasoline on this fire for these types of things to happen. He also then bases his dad becoming a Trump supporter as something that most people did, even though you can tell by the election results that because Trump didn't win the second time, that actually the opposite happened more often. But that's just a comment that I thought was weird. But feels like he wants to discuss without religion, but he starts with religious fundamentalism, so people want to stay as a Dear Mr. Atheist video, despite the fact that this felt like reporting on news, which was the Sometimes Show content. It's just he changed his tonality a little bit. I ended just with sad on a human level to see someone get put into a box because the new content feels really disingenuous. And that I'm still frustrated, though, that after all this time, everything is still presented as a dichotomy, and either me against drama community, Christians versus atheists, good left versus right, and people who agree with him that are good, and people who disagree with him that are bad. And I just don't like that personally. And I think thinking critically, a lot of people would agree. And notice how I say a lot and not everyone, right? So finally, after all this time, in conclusion, Jimmy came to the limelight as a result of the limelight of the outside communities. Limelight of the Sometimes Show. No. He came to the limelight for atheists from the Non-Sequitur show, but came to the limelight of the other communities through Gabbie Hanna. The separation of the viewerships after the affiliation with Gabbie Hanna ended caused so much of the trail on to get lost, which is what this video was for. And I just thought it was really interesting to reflect on this, especially of a video that just gave me so much traction in both my relationships online, my relationships with other content creators, and my own channel. So I thought I would kind of give it a send-off as a way to be kind of thankful for where everything came. And I do want to say, if you want, let me know if you want me to do more of these on creators I've visited in the past. If not, on other creators. I have a poll in my community tab. I don't know if it's closed yet. I'll make another one every maybe couple weeks. I had one on where are they now iDubbbz and where are they now Tana Mojo as well. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this whole thing. If you took breaks and you got to this point still, bless thy soul. And I guess no pun intended, the atheist commenting. Anyways, you guys have a great day, and thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, the whole nine, and you guys have a good day. Bye.
I'm tired of being criticized because I still listen to One Direction. You're too old for that music, Skylar. What else am I supposed to play? The flute?